And we are live. Welcome everybody to Lubbock Compact Live for Wednesday, June the 28th. This is our last one of the month. And we normally do this around this time. I am your host, Adam Hernandez, here with my co-host, Josh Shankles. And we are with Lubbock Compact, and we are going to talk about all sorts of city updates. So Josh, let's go ahead and just kick it off. We got a lot to move through here. So let's go ahead and kick it off.
We've got so much. 2 meetings this month. We want to get into the city council meetings first. Continuing to follow business there, but there were a few things that we thought were worthy of like bringing forward to the public out of these last couple of meetings that were noteworthy, that a lot of our mission is helping people understand how our city's functioning and where efficiencies could be had and where they could get in on things. So first thing to talk about is that the city has been purchasing fleet vehicles. This is almost always a part of budget. The city uses vehicles for all kinds of things. The police and fire department are kind of obvious, but city maintenance and all kinds of stuff. And they've been purchasing these because we need to expand city services. These are cycling out. But since the pandemic hit, we've been a little bit hung up on our ability to like secure and replace this. Fleet vehicles are something that's kind of like a separate component of the automotive industry, and they take all the orders in one time of year and then start delivering those over the course of the year. There's competitive bidding processes. You're in competition with other cities, states, the federal government for this type of equipment. And so since the pandemic, since the chip shortage, there have been trouble in the supply lines to get all the vehicles that they need. And so they've been wiggling and going to local dealers and making compromises on like which ones they can get. The city already has an instituted policy to, instead of cycling them out by time or mileage, that they do it through a rigorous inspection process and keep maintenance at a really high level. And so they're able to get an extended life out of a lot of these vehicles or move them to things where they maybe are still useful, as they start to wear down. So anyway, the thing that I thought was noteworthy is that Jared Atkinson, our city manager, said that this was the single most bottlenecked issue that the city is experiencing right now in just the maintenance and general operations of the city, is being able to get our hands on enough equipment, new equipment, to fulfill these needs and keep up with pace and city service. But it's something that the city's attentive to and trying to resolve and doing its best. So, we thought it was important to bring forward because, of course, a lot of things that go on with regard to frustration with the city has to do with non-delivery on service. And this is something that's appropriate to be frustrated with the city about. But we thought it was important to kind of bring forward to the public that maybe the city needs a little bit of understanding and patience, and to also keep in mind that this is a good reason why we're getting our city on better and better financial track, because as we deal with these inflationary pressures and delays and things, we have that cash balance to kind of wiggle around and move in the budget and get some things in a better position. So that was the first one that I thought I would bring forward to the public, was about this vehicle purchases and kind of the hang up here and the bottlenecks. Adam?
Yeah, the city, I can say at least from what I've seen, the city, I visited several of the facilities of the various city departments, fleet being one of them. But there's vehicles all over, obviously, not just in fleet services, but all sorts of vehicles. And I can tell you that the city definitely gets the useful life, and probably past the useful life, of a lot of these machines because of what you were just talking about. Also, just trying to be good stewards of the money that we have to do those things. But I will say that we could help ourselves out a little bit in this regard when we talk about how we spend money as a city. And a lot of the times, anytime the city brings up, we need to buy this or that, I get it if it's something that's not really all that important. I get it to not want to spend money on things like that, but when it comes to city services that we know that we have issues with, if that's the issue is because we don't have enough equipment, then we need to spend the money and get that equipment. And then we don't have the problem. And then you mix it with this idea of making sure that the maintenance is at a high level so you're not having to replace those things as much, again, saving money on the long haul. And so I just think that we need to start thinking about this as a city. We are a growing city, but I will stress again that we are not growing at a regular rate. We're not growing at the regular rates that cities grow. We're just not. We're growing exponentially. And what that means is we're growing really fast in a very short amount of time. Okay. We're growing, depending on who you talk to, 2 to 5% year over year. That's a lot for any city. And we're already at 300,000. We spend money like we're growing at a regular rate, and it's going to continue to be a problem until we spend money like at the speed that we're growing. And so I'm just happy to see that they're at least trying to do these different things. And I am aware of a lot of those supply chain issues. And so, yeah, that's my thoughts.
Yeah, no. And, the only other thing that I would say is, we're like entering this era where electric fleet vehicles are becoming more and more available. These types of vehicles have exponentially less moving components and therefore exponentially less maintenance costs. They do, of course, cost a lot in batteries, and that's another sort of thing to cycle out. But we also have the potential to sort of fuel these things for free on our almost infinite supply of sunshine and wind in Lubbock. And so I hope that the city starts to take a serious look at like how we could utilize maybe electric fleet and how we could realize efficiencies there. And if there are efficiencies there, it'd be an interesting thing to study. Okay. Next one up on city council agenda that we thought was important to bring forward are some city maintenance stuff. This is really kind of wonky and sort of background noise in the city's operations. But there's a couple of things that I thought were interesting in here. One is that the city contracts to do ongoing water line replacement, particularly in the older parts of cities. Obviously, those are the older water lines. Newer water lines are in newer parts of the city. And so the city was renewing its contract to be replacing these water lines, upgrading them, making sure they're up to industry standard. That's a good thing to see because we know about the harms of like water contamination, but also making sure that we have reliable supply and that, we want every time the tap comes on in a home for that to come up. And so we saw that they were taking action there. And there's another water related issue in the city maintenance piece, which is that the city has been steadily working on more drainage infrastructure throughout the city. We have some parts of it where we have drainage problems that need to be resolved, but this also goes along with our long-term water strategy to connect more playa lakes to each other, to the Canyon Lake system, so that we have an ever more robust system for dealing with excess water quantities, retaining it, and being able to put it back into our water system for use. Lubbock is a leader here. We've talked about this many times on the show. We have a very secure water future and we continue to build on that. That's a good position to be in. And Lubbock also has a lot of, our playas provide a natural geographic feature that helps us out in this area. And that's good that we're networking this and taking advantage of it. The one thing that I would say about this that came up is that, of course, water infrastructure is paid for in a roundabout way through service fees on our utility bills. Now, in actuality, it's a little more complicated, but because these projects are so expensive that they're actually bond funded. And then the money collected on the utility fees goes to service that debt for the bond. And when we started this project, it was 75 cents about of every dollar that went to service that bond. Now we have worked that down to where we're at a little under 50 cents of every dollar collected goes to service that debt maintenance. Now, this is a thing that will never fall to zero, or at least not as anticipated, at least not as it's currently funded. But it's nice to see us working down that debt. Now, as you well know, Adam, because we know how the impact fee situation played out, the city collects no revenue for new development for impact fees on water infrastructure whatsoever at all. Developers pay $0 for this. At the time of implementation, it was stressed that the water system was anticipated to be solvent on revenues, but while that is so, it is not fair that the taxpayers are carrying this whole burden, and we could be working faster on securing this infrastructure and continuing to take advantage on this if we had a more robust and solvent system and we were charging developers their fair share. Go.
Yeah, no, I think it's good to let people know about these kind of things because we do our fair share of criticizing the city when that needs to happen, in our opinion. But we also try to put this information out there so that people know that the city actually is working on your behalf a lot of the time. You just really don't see it. They're not very loud about it. You know, we catch these things in a city council meeting very quickly. And so a lot of people don't hear about this kind of stuff, but it's good for people to have the updated information about our city. And I do really like this idea of diverting the stormwater and things to the playa lakes, the natural playa lakes, and into that system, because we actually recently, this has been a recent thing, and because the process takes over 20 years, at least it did for Lubbock, to get the water rights to capture more of our water. And so we have that now. And so it only makes sense to then move to capture more of that water, right? If we have the right to do it, why not do that and reuse it? And so one thing that we've seen developers do to try to help with this is create these kind of uh, faux playa lakes in these subdivisions where it's just essentially a hole in the ground that will catch some of that. But they don't really work as well, because what happens is you get a very little amount of water in there, you know, as it rains over several days. And then once it stops raining, it's 100 and something degrees, it all evaporates out of there. That's not really as big of an issue with the playa lakes because they're naturally occurring water sources. And so you're going to have some evaporation, but it shouldn't hopefully ever go to zero. Also, the other thing I'll say real quick that you kind of brought up is how these debts are serviced. And I think it's important every time we have a conversation about the budget, I like to bring this up because it's important to understand how the city operates. It's not necessarily how your household operates. So you don't, in your house, for instance, you may have one or two bank accounts where all of your income is coming in and you're paying everything out of those two. In a city, it's much different. You have your general fund, which is from the taxes, and that has lots of regulations, has to be spent a certain way and maintained a certain way. Then you have enterprise funds where you have fees like water, and so those things bring in their own money. And so when we talk about taking on debts, for instance, for LP&L or for the water, those debts are not serviced by your property taxes. Those debts are serviced by those fees. And so it's built in. And like Josh said, you get a bond that's based on those predicted revenues because they can predict those revenues. And that's how we're able to secure those. And then they're paid down over time. And I would just add one more little thing here is that the finance department of the city does a really great job of making sure those debts are getting paid down and not taking on too much while they're trying to pay other things down. And so it's kind of this constant dance between that. But at least from everything I've seen over the last several years of closely paying attention to this, we are pretty smart with our money as a city.
Right. No, well said. And perfect transition to the next thing. This is more of just a notice, but longtime listeners of the show, followers of this, know that our budget cycles come up in the fall. And so right now, city departments are starting to prepare materials to present to council. They will have a number of budget sessions, and those begin starting August 1st. So city council meetings, work sessions, all of these budget sessions will be taking place starting in August 1st. So for us, for organizations like us, for people who have some kind of connection to city business, city operations, or people who have some special interest or something that the city hasn't been attending to that it should be, or whatever. Now's the time to be lining up your ducks, contacting your city council members, contacting those relevant departments in the city staff, because this is all lining up. So we just want to kind of throw that out there. Budget sessions are ongoing. I know we're going to be thinking about this, looking at this, talking about this in the coming months.
Yeah, like you said, those who have followed along will know this, but many may not know that the budget sessions is where Lubbock Compact has got a lot of our wins, because this, as Josh said, this is when the city is thinking, how are they going to spend the money for the next coming year? And they take proposals. Now, they don't honor all proposals, obviously, but they take proposals from the internal departments. So the departments will give the city manager their sort of wish list, things that they feel like they need to do their job better, or whatever it may be. And then, you know, there's a process to filter those through to city council, who then will vote on those things. We've gotten the dirt road fund increased in this budget session. We were able to get the neighborhood planner approved, and the extra $500,000 that he's able to use for neighborhoods approved in a budget session. And there's just we could go on and on, but there's lots of things you can get done in a budget session. If you have some idea, something that you think might be something to pursue in this way, reach out to us. We'll help you with as much information as we can about kind of how to do that, and what the steps are to try to get that done. We're more than happy to do it.
Great. Yeah, perfect. And we're right on track. The last thing to bring people up to speed on, this is just like kind of finalizing the thing that we've been watching all the way through and commenting about. But the city was finalizing all the remaining details to do the tax abatement and reinvestment zone and everything that is connected to economic development, in this case for X-FAB manufacturing. We've been watching this for some time. And so these are some of the last steps to kind of get that set up. You know, as we've said on the show before, this is the type of jobs, manufacturing industry that we want to be recruiting to Lubbock. This helps diversify our industrial portfolio and makes Lubbock more economically hardened. And so these are good uses, or this is a net benefit. Luprino also falls under this. We've seen other businesses. In fact, just today they announced a hydroponic vegetable producer that's going to be huge and bring like 900 other jobs. So generally speaking, these are very meritorious and worthy projects. They do a really good job of fitting them to kind of our workers, our industrial and economic profile, our hubbing potential and transportation thing. And so most of these are a good fit. But as we've said before, this is something to keep an eye on. The downside criticism of this is, of course, we're letting go of a lot of tax revenue that we would otherwise be collecting on this. The argument there is you get it back in sales tax and income tax and increased economic activity. And maybe that's true. I think it's something to watch and keep a careful account of. And because we've seen other cities, municipalities around the nation get upside down with these kinds of business relationships, end up having water supplies depleted and all kinds of negative outcomes. So this isn't something that you want to just leave on autopilot and let go endlessly. It's something that you want to watch and really carefully tailor and calibrate to the needs of the city. Go on.
Yeah, I think at least from what we've seen in recent times, the city has done a good job of picking these companies and things and kind of what they do. So for instance, Luprino is actually adding to our water supply. So that's great. And then with the hydroponic produce farm, the way that it's set up uses much less water than traditional ways that we do that. And this is just one of those things in particular that fits so perfectly for our region, right? We're in such a perfect spot to do so many different things, but this is one of those things, right? If we if we can figure out how to do this here in our hot, arid, almost deserty climate, then you can take this information and go, use it in other places. And how cool is it that we developed a lot of these things here, or helped
Right.
the development of that here, So
Yeah,
good stuff.
so well said. So anyway, those are the things that we wanted to bring forward. But before we kind of move on to our next segment, we were talking about this before the show, but and we want to get into this a little bit later when we're talking about the Peaceful Rainbow Sit-in yesterday, big news, big events, lots to say about that. But like we've said so often on this show, we keep our eye on this city stuff. We try to bring a deeper understanding to how these sort of policies and processes work together. And we sit through a lot of really boring meetings, but in doing so, we learn a lot about kind of this sort of mysterious, often invisible sort of processes that are guiding and moving our city forward. And our hope is that that gives the public a better understanding of how this functions, ways that they can connect to this issue and maybe feel like we've lowered a barrier so that they can understand this, make better informed decisions, or connect with it if it's an issue that speaks to them. It's something that they would like to interact with us, with the city council, with other organizations that are partnered or whatever. And so anyway, that's why we do what we do. I know we want to get into this in a minute, but yesterday it was really, you brought up some interesting things about how some of the rest of the public saw this. And so anyway, I just thought it was an interesting topic, but it's worth noting again that the reason why we do what we do is to keep an eye on this, to connect what activities are going on with like best policies or maybe different perspectives that don't always come to the fore. And it's something as policy wonks we enjoy doing. So anyway, before we moved on, I thought it was worthy of mentioning.
Yeah.
Cool, man. Well, community resource spotlighted, dude.
Yeah. Well, when are we, you want to do the rainbow sit-in now?
Oh,
or
yeah,
we
yeah,
doing-
yeah. Sorry, my
Okay.
eyes jumped ahead. You
Nah.
see me. So yes, let's get into this Peaceful Rainbow Sit-in. Adam, why don't you tell people some of the background, how we got to this point, just bring everybody up to speed who may not be fully aware.
Yeah, so what Josh was referring to, some of that, as far as people getting involved in the city and stuff, we saw some of that happen yesterday at this rainbow sit-in that we're about to talk about, and I think it's a really good thing. The sit-in came about not necessarily to have folks engaged, because it was actually a silent sit-in. We were just sitting there. We didn't have any plans to talk, but it actually turned into some folks getting engaged. And so the background behind the rainbow sit-in that took place yesterday at yesterday's city council meeting was really started back in March. And so in March, the Lubbock Compact, if you'll remember that show, we talked about it on the show at that time. Lubbock Compact, Lubbock Pride, NAACP, and several other organizations, lots of individuals, all sent letters to the city council asking for a proclamation from the city denouncing hate speech, racial bullying, anti-Semitism, homophobia, transphobia, all of these things, because there was a couple of things going on at that time. Number one was the anniversary was coming up of Lubbock City Charter that segregated the city based on race. And so that was a significant time at that time. But also what was happening at the city at that same time was we had several incidents, and these are still ongoing. So there's investigations and there's solutions trying to be found for these things still. That's ongoing. But in several of our school districts, there was racial bullying going on. A lot of the staff at those school districts were either complicit or just completely just negligent and not really worried about it and not handling those issues. And so those things were escalating into the news about Lubbock. They made national news with that. And then at the same time, we had a situation again in the school districts where there was like some anti-Semitic messages that were being circulated by students, and that had hit the news. And then there was some, I guess you call them protesters. There was grown people outside of high schools yelling at kids with, hate messages about homophobia and transphobia on their signs. All of this was going on. That was in the news. And so we had a lot of things going on in the city. And will that stop everything? No. But when you have your leadership step up and say, this is not who we are, that says a lot. Because what the narrative is that, well, we're in Lubbock, these people should understand. No, human beings exist on a spectrum around the world. It doesn't matter where you go, right? So that's just it. It's not on somebody else to move or go away or stop making you uncomfortable by existing. It's not on them. It's on you to mind your own business and not be aggressive towards them for no reason whatsoever other than them living their lives as human beings. And that's really all it boils down to. And when you have leadership step up and say, this is not who we are, y'all are saying this is who we are, but we are saying as the city officially, this is not who we are. This is not what we want to represent. This is not how we want to be seen in the world. Unfortunately, those letters, all of them, and I don't even know how many were sent, a lot, all ignored. No responses whatsoever from not one single council member, not one, including the mayor. Now, fast forward to just before June, in May, early May, or the middle of May, the folks over at Lubbock Pride were preparing for the Pride celebration that's been happening here in Lubbock for the past 11 years, right? So they were preparing for that. And in cities all over the US, it's pretty routine at this point. There's proclamations made to make June Pride Month in that city. And so Lubbock Pride reached out to the city council members in early to mid-May to ask them for a proclamation declaring Lubbock, or declaring June Pride Month in Lubbock. And the request was if it could happen either before the Pride event or at the Pride event. And it's not uncommon for the city council to go to some event and have a proclamation. They've done this. We've seen this council in particular has done the most proclamations I've seen. The last council did not do proclamations as often as this one has. So this is not an uncommon thing. And we've seen proclamations for Spanish singers that don't live here, that just come perform here all the time. We've seen proclamations for the Slayton Bakery, which is not here, but they've been in business for 100 years. So we gave them a proclamation. We've seen all sorts of proclamations. I mean, it's just been a slew of them from this council. And so it really wasn't a crazy request to ask them to do this thing, right? The entire council ignored the folks over at Lubbock Pride until several days after the event had already taken place. And so the councilman for District 3, Mark McBrayer, unfortunately responded 3 days later with a pretty tone deaf, in my opinion, response to this request. And he labeled the situation as sexual politics. So that's pretty problematic. I know that a lot of folks out there will not understand why that's problematic, but that's why we're here trying to put out a different perspective, put out the information so that you understand. We are talking about human beings. So if a great example was given actually by Bethany Luna, who was at the sit-in, and when she was talking to Mark McBrayer, essentially what you're doing is you're taking somebody's life and you're making it the same as all the zoning cases that they were just looking at the city council yesterday. And I don't care who you are, what community you're from. If somebody were to do that to you, you probably wouldn't appreciate it either. And so we're talking about human beings' lives. We're not talking about a lifestyle choice. That's false. You're operating from a base of false information. If you believe the following, if you believe that this is a lifestyle choice, if you believe that people are not born this way, or if you believe that people only come in two varieties. Humans come in a spectrum of varieties. It just is what it is. And at this point in time, the broader community is coming out and saying, we're tired of dealing with this marginalization that we've been dealing with, because these types of human beings have existed from the beginning of time. There was just a time when they could have literally, and it's still the case depending on the situation, they could literally lose their lives, their livelihood, their jobs, everything, if they were found out to be some other variety of human besides the two that a lot of folks like to fixate on. Okay. And so that's where we are. And that's what the situation is. And so it was unfortunate that his response was that, and it kind of got worse from there, honestly. And so that was the response. Another response came from the councilwoman for District 1, Christine Martinez Garcia, 10 days after the event, saying that she had just seen it and that she was out of town and all of that good stuff. Still no mention of the letter sent in March for many of these folks or anything like that, right? And so when you're dealing with this is literally why Lubbock Compact was created. When you come up against this wall of the council is just not going to talk about it, they're not going to try to engage on it, you have to take some sort of action to be recognized. And so that's what happened. And so this rainbow sit-in was put together and organized mostly by Kim Gonzalez, who is with Lubbock Compact. She had some help on it, but she pretty much led that charge on that. And so the idea here was we were just going to silently sit those folks from the LGBTQ plus community as well as allies. We're going to go and sit and wear a solid color of the rainbow and essentially create a rainbow inside of chambers. And we did that with about 80 people. And so just went and sat silently. And it's, to me, it's pretty ridiculous. But the idea was, and it worked apparently, judging by some of the demeanors of these folks. Because again, I go to city council meetings all the time. I'm around a lot of people at Citizens Tower all the time. I can tell you that at least in some of those individuals, they were very uncomfortable. And why were they so uncomfortable? Because these human beings were simply there existing. And on top of that, had the audacity to exist there in the pattern of a rainbow. And so it's pretty ridiculous when you think about it, but that was really the point, just for people to be seen and acknowledged when leadership is trying to ignore them. And so in my mind, as far as from a organization and mobilization standpoint, flawless execution, big success. We did get to speak with Councilman McBrayer after the sit-in. And so credit to him for approaching the group and actually listening and having a conversation. I don't know that there was much learned on Mr. McBrayer's part, but we did present him some new information, tried to have a conversation to let him understand why it was so problematic to refer to this topic as sexual politics or some of the other problematic things he said. He did mention that, they had seen some video of a pride celebration. We have no clue where that was at. And so he was like, look at what's going on at these pride celebrations. I asked him, did he go to Lubbock Pride? Because I was there. I was there for several hours of that event. I asked him, did you go to Lubbock Pride? He said no. I said, well, I did, and I didn't see anything crazy. It was a family-friendly event. The atmosphere was very friendly. And I can tell you, last year was the first Pride event I've ever been able to go to. And just so everybody understands, I am a homosexual male, but the last year was the first time I was able to go just to experience it, just to be an ally and to support these folks who are my friends and people who I love and care about. And so I went out there and I saw it then. And then this Pride event this year, they actually were able to move it downtown. And so it was much larger. There was many more people there. And it was so noticeable that several people commented to me. And I also observed the atmosphere was just so friendly. Like there wasn't anything making me uncomfortable as a homosexual male or anything like that. It was so friendly, so many great people there, and so, you know, so many different vendors and products and performers and things of this nature. And last thing I'll say about this is that when you think about individuals as an asset, a human being can be an asset regardless of what their gender is or anything else. And when you just offhand dismiss a human being because you don't agree with where they are on the spectrum of human beings, it's so short-sighted, and we end up losing a lot of people who are assets and who bring lots of things to all of the things that we're trying to do. Whether you're in business, whether we're talking about city staff, who many are in this community who are literally the best in the world at what they do. So you're going to dismiss those assets because they fall on a spectrum of humanity that you can't deal with. And so the message was to Mr. McBrayer, who was really the only one who approached this, was who would this have hurt? Because his response in his message was, because citizens would have had a disagreement, it's improper to do a proclamation. Well, lots of people had a alternative view of the sanctuary city ordinance, and none of that was said. So when those things are passed, it's okay if it's controversial. It's okay if some of the people in the community have a problem with it because we say so. But when it's something else that we don't necessarily like or feel comfortable with, then it's a problem, and it would be improper because then we're going to have an argument amongst some of the citizens. And so it was a weak response. It's a weak excuse. And that's why we felt the need that needed to happen. I'm so grateful for Kim and everybody that put that together, everybody that showed up. Once again, I think there was two things accomplished here. Number one, we really didn't expect a lot of folks to stay through the entirety of the meeting. We didn't really know how long the meeting was going to go, so we had told people an hour. It went, almost 3 hours. And so a lot of people stayed. I mean, a good majority of the people stayed through the whole meeting, and a few of them got involved when it was issues that they cared about, right? And they had no plan to go speak on anything when they went in there. And I say that to say or to show that it's not always a really hard thing to get involved. They saw something come up on the agenda. One of them was a storage unit that was being built next to somebody's neighborhood, somebody that lives in that neighborhood. There was going to be a storage facility built. They were asking for a zoning variance so that they could build the storage facility. That was something that was of concern to her. She got up and made a comment. There was the Ella Apartments, which we're about to get into. That issue came up. You had 3 or 4 people stand up and speak to that issue. And so that happened, as well as one other thing. Now, they're not going to admit this, unfortunately. But if they're being honest, city staff and anybody else who was uncomfortable in that room, they will have to say one thing that is an absolute fact. Every single person that went to that sit-in was respectful. The energy was friendly. There was never any shouting, any contention, no anything coming from that crowd. Now, I've seen the other side. I've seen other folks go in there when it's property taxes or when it's whatever else, and they're not that way. And so if you're city staff or you're somebody that was uncomfortable with that situation, at the very least, you have to say, you know what? I thought these people were going to be, having horns coming out of their head and going to be just, obscene and all of these different things. You have to understand the fact that that was not the case. These were respectful, perfectly civil human beings that were just there to be recognized. And the perfect quote to end this with is from Nick's Harpster, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember it word for word, but essentially he was saying that the LGBTQ plus community in Lubbock, which is part of our community, Okay. These are human beings in our community. They want to know and be assured by their elected officials that that elected official represents them the same way they represent everybody else. And that's it. And that should be the baseline. But for some reason, in Lubbock, it's controversial. And so that was pretty much my rant on the Rainbow Sit-In. Great event, great turnout, got a lot of media attention. You definitely had some ignorance going on in the comments, but you also had a lot of love going on in the comments and a lot of solidarity going on. And I think it was a beautiful thing.
Dude, I think you said that perfectly, and I've got no notes about it. Well done. And yes, from the bottom of my heart, thank you to everybody who helped organize that and attended that. Really tremendous. Okay, now you can do the community resource spotlight.
All right, community resource spotlight for the day is the City of Lubbock Mosquito Hotline. You need to know about this. We know that mosquitoes are a thing in Lubbock. They're, for whatever reason, like 10 times as big now. And like, I don't know, they're crazy, but there's a bunch of them, right? So if wherever you're at, if you're having a big problem with mosquitoes, and we know there's a lot of those areas around the city, you can call the City of Lubbock Mosquito Hotline. And so you just essentially you report where you're at, and this helps the city find hotspots. So if you're having a problem like this, I know several places in East Lubbock where I grew up where this is a huge problem. I know a lot of places in North and Central Lubbock where this is a huge problem. There's some parts you know, on the outer parts of West and South and even Northwest Lubbock where this is a big problem. And so you'll help identify those hotspot areas for them so that they can get the trucks out there and spray for them. That's pretty much the punchline. And it helps them stay on top of it. And so a lot of the city services work a lot better for you if you help them help you. And I know it can be a pain to add another thing to do, to call the city or call this hotline, but it really goes a long way. It takes a few minutes. You know, I've seen it happen. It takes a few minutes. You just go on there, give it a call, tell them where you're at, and put your, you know, all the information in there, and that's it. And so the hotline is 806-775-3110. And once again, the City of Lubbock Mosquito Hotline is 806-775-3110. So give them a call, help them help us, and get rid of these huge gangs of mosquitoes that are running rampant in our city.
Getting into my house, buzzing at my ear as I'm trying to go to sleep. Yes, please do your part. Organize with your neighbors. You know, maybe you don't have time to call about the mosquitoes, but maybe the nice grandma across the street would do that if you would knock on her door and be like, hey, will you call the city today? Anyway, okay. We're powering through. We're gonna hit these last bits. I think all this is important. We wanted to give the public an update as to our Lubbock Environmental Action Plan, LEAP, Air Quality Monitoring Project. Folks may remember in the fall of 2022, we applied for the EPA's Enhanced Air Quality Monitoring for Communities grant. This was designed to help communities who you know, need more investigative power and more science power in their community to kind of get to the bottom of the problem. Folks may remember the health outcome study released by Texas Tech Health Sciences Center in Sam Houston State that pointed to a highly elevated level of severe asthma and allergy in the northeast quadrant of our city. We have long asserted, and it was one of the hypotheses of this study, that might be connected to the industrial zoning in our city. We applied for the grant. We found out we won it last year. And since that time, we have been in a revisions and review process with the government. And so we just wanted to give people an update to this, that we have been working diligently on this. We have been going back and forth with the government. The federal government wants to use your tax dollars very safely and wisely. So they are checking out they're dotting every I and crossing every T. We're getting ever closer to that being complete and in place and ready to go. And we anticipate it may start as early as July 1st. What starting means, still a little bit fuzzy to us. But we'll be rolling that out into the late summer and the fall. We're going to be looking for sites all across the city to host our air monitors. This is a 3-year project. So we need folks long-term. We need folks all over the city. We need more people than we'll actually select. We're going to put out 40 monitors, but we need more sites than we'll actually select because some of them may not be suitable. It'll kind of build up in a big grid. Of course, we want to get these monitors in locations where we can check out things that we think might be a problem, like the concrete batching, like the cotton burr processing, like different construction projects and open agricultural areas, really anything that's particulate in the air. And so we just wanted to give people a quick update about that. If you see something in your neighborhood that might be a concern, the crematories, this is another one. Yeah, if you have something in your neighborhood that might be a concern of you, or and something in your region that might be a concern to you, it was just a few weeks ago that we noticed there's a whole other concrete batching plant way deep in South Lubbock on 114th Street. So if you have something that might be a concern to you, and or you might like to host one of these monitors for any reason whatsoever, because we also need places that are no problem, that are going to serve as our controls and our checks in this. So if at all you're interested, you can reach out to us through our social media, message our page. You can send an email to LEAP, LEAP at LubbockCompact.com. You can send an email straight to me, Joshua at LubbockCompact.com. We want to hear from you. Don't hesitate to reach out. But that's a quick update on where LEAP is and where we anticipate that's gonna be heading. Adam, I know you attended the Ella apartment meetings this afternoon. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so one of the things, actually this came up at the city council meeting as well yesterday. So there is an apartment complex here in Lubbock. It is currently called the Ella Apartments. It has over time been called various things. It was the Garden Apartments. It was the Cricket Court Apartments. It is currently the Ella Apartments. It's over on 58th and Q, just on the east side of Q. And essentially what's going on is these are low-income housing units, and these are people in a not the best position when it comes to bargaining or negotiating. And so what's going on is that the tenants, many of the tenants, not all of them, we did speak to some where they felt like their apartment was fine, but they did say that there were lots of apartments where you have issues ranging from no running water to no AC to mold to roaches and rats coming through the walls from vacant apartments next door, all sorts of things. And so you've got I think one person said that there was somebody's bathroom was caving in. And so there's some pretty significant problems that some of these folks are facing. And what the goal was of today's meeting was to try to find out some exact needs from some of those residents, particularly the ones who needed some sort of relief from the heat, because as you all know, we've had over 100-degree weather for the past 2 weeks or more. And one of the apartments, Phyllis Gant, who was helping with this effort, went the other night into an elderly lady's apartment there at 8 p.m. It was about 8 p.m. in the evening, and it was 89 degrees in this elderly woman's apartment at 8 p.m. So you can imagine what the temperature is at noon or 4 p.m. Okay. And a lot of these folks are elderly. A lot of these are families with kids, small kids. And so it's a pretty big problem. What's going on, the management at the facility seems to be very hostile to the tenants from what we've heard. And Phyllis tried to go speak to that person, the person that was in the office, and she was at first talking and communicating, but then when she realized that Phyllis was with this effort to try to improve the complex, she shut down. She's now locking the doors as we were pulling up today to not have to deal with anybody. And a lot of the residents are reporting that there has been retaliation. If they speak out or if they try to get this out to the media or anything like that, we're hearing reports of illegal evictions happening. And again, these are folks who are in a very desperate situation when it comes to finances, when it comes to their position in life. And so they don't have a lot of options. And so if somebody puts them out on the street, they're literally their whole family could literally be living on the street. And so that's what they have to look out for, and they have to take care of their family just like everybody else. And so we were able to talk to a few residents, and a lot of them were just too scared to come talk to us. We did there was some media that showed up there today at the meeting. They were afraid to have the cameras on, all of that. And so it is a problem. Unfortunately, the property owner is a LLC in Ohio. And we have this problem a lot across our city, not just with multifamily units, but also with some single family residential homes in various communities across the city, where you'll have the owner will be in another state. It's not necessarily a property that they really care about. They just want to have it in their portfolio or whatever. They don't take care of it. A lot of these become houses for squatters, for people who are experiencing homelessness. Some of these get turned into drug houses from time to time. They become real public health issues in those neighborhoods, on top of the fact that they bring down property values in the neighborhoods and make the neighborhood not look very nice when it's next to, nicer houses and things of this nature. And a lot of it is that it's LLCs or it's people that are out of state that are just absentee landlords and just don't care too much about it. So at this point, this has been an ongoing situation at the LL apartments. And so when this is the case and a lot of different things have been tried, I think that it's time for city leadership to step up. Now, at yesterday's council meeting, there was a proposal put before the council to essentially get some grant funding, long story short, to rehab the LL apartments. And they approved it, and that's great. But the deal will not even close until September, and then the rehab would take place sometime after that. We still got a lot of time in the summer to go. We need to get these folks over that gap between now and when those rehabs are able to happen. And hopefully they will have proper AC and all of those things once they do those rehabs. From what we're told, the funding is meant to put $80,000 into each one of the buildings of the complex. And so that should be able to take care of a lot of different issues. And so this is going to be an ongoing thing. We were able to hand out some fans today to some people. We were able to get some more information about the situation. And so we're going to continue to monitor this. The DSA kind of led the charge on this and was out there and hosting the meeting. And they were trying to educate the few tenants that would speak to them about organizing and the possibility of creating a tenant association or a tenants union so that they can be in a better bargaining position. We're not exactly sure if they're ready for that part yet, but what we can do as a community, and the DSA will continue to monitor the situation and work with those residents. But what we can continue to do as a community in the meantime is to urge the city council and city leadership to get involved in this. Those who are concerned can help by contacting code enforcement or building inspection department to try to get some of these things rectified, because code enforcement and building inspection have police powers. And so if they have to go out there a bunch of times, if there's a bunch of issues, there can be other things that could happen for that property owner that would then make them maybe do some things. And so also we will just need community support with if somebody needs a fan or an AC unit or some help paying for a plumber or something like this. From what we were told, there's like one maintenance guy that lives in the complex and he does what he can, but there may need to be some more help in that area. And so that's the situation at the Ella Apartments. It's pretty bad. We will be following up with city leadership, and all of that is all underway. We don't know if this may hit the news if it hasn't already. There was some media out there and did some interviews, and so that's the part the situation with the Ella Apartments. If you would like to help out, or if you're interested in helping out with this in any way, please reach out to us, and we'll put you in contact with some folks to get you to be able to help the situation out.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, this is so central to everything that we do, everything that our partners do, the things we advocate for. Lubbock is a better place, a safer place, a more friendly place, a place where you're more secure when all of us are in a better position, when all of us have robust safety, when all of us have our base needs met, when all of these things are in place. And so, you know, we know our people show up for everything. We know how taxing that is. We thank you for continuing to show up, our broader community. And, you know, if you're so inclined and you're out there on the sidelines, we would love to get you connected to anything that lays on your heart. Okay.
And
Let me
I
get these
would like one quick
yeah.
thing I just want to add before we move on. I just thought about it, and I really would be remiss if I did not add this in here. I want to let people know out there, because some people may have their thoughts conjured up because these are low income housing apartments, and you may have some judgments happening in your mind. What I can tell you is from experience, right? I did not grow up with a lot of means. So I was one of those people. This is why I have such empathy for it. That's why I identify with it so much. You really have no idea ever why somebody is in the financial situation that they are in. So just because these folks live in low income housing, or they're maybe in a worse position than you, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's all their fault. It doesn't necessarily mean that they can do something about it in that moment. And when you're there, not until you're there, until you're a parent who can't provide something for your child, or can't provide the basic needs in your housing for your family, and there's nothing you can do about it, then you really can't judge somebody in that position. And so I would urge folks out there to put aside any thoughts that you may have that, oh, well, you know, this is their own doing, or whatever the case may be. You have no idea why they're there. And at the end of the day, these are human beings with families, and these are elders, and these are kids. And we need to as a community, help those who are less fortunate than us for whatever reason they may be less fortunate. And so just wanted to add that part in there.
No, I'm so glad you did. Okay. These are just going to take me a minute. This is the month in review. We just want to bring these things back to people's attention and get them out there. One is we've been following the housing development going on in South Overton. We brought it up maybe last show, maybe a couple shows ago. But folks may remember this is similar to the up campus development, a large scale student housing complex that has submitted an application for a zoning change in South Overton. Organizers around this issue, many of them also were connected to Up Campus, are meeting about this. And so we wanted to let people know again that the first meeting where this will be discussed is July 6th, 6 p.m. for the planning and zoning meeting. If you are somebody who, you know, lives in South Overton especially, but also is connected to this issue or have feelings about it, that'll be a time for you to speak your mind. But we would also mention that the Congress of Neighborhood Association meeting is tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. at Shepherd King Lutheran Church, and they will be discussing this topic and others. And so if you are wanting to get involved or organize with those individuals, or get up to speed or express your opinion, whatever it is, those are your times and places. And then the other one that we wanted to bring up is that, of course, we've been following the neighborhood planning meetings for Dunbar, Manhattan Heights, and Jackson Mahon, and we're getting close to presenting that to City Council for adoption. We anticipate that'll be late July, early August when this project wraps up and this gets presented. Of course, we're going to be watching this and also watching the implementation. That is the most important part. The neighborhoods have come up with great plans. We want to see that followed through. But we'd also tell people that they're having a party to celebrate with everybody and thank them for contributing to this. July 20th will be Jackson Mahon's party, and July 21st will be Dunbar, Manhattan Heights party. You can find out more details on the websites or the Facebook pages for the Dunbar, Manhattan Heights plan, for the Jackson Mahon plan, the websites for either of these plans, and we'll be sharing that information as well. Anything else, Adam?
Yeah, I just got a couple of comments here to read and
Oh, yeah,
acknowledge. So Stacy Johnson was commenting about the Ella apartment situation. She said, what about the Texas Apartment Association? Good idea there. The idea that we kind of proposed to everybody that was there was that they essentially need to use all of the tools that we can, right? So all of the organizations we can contact, that's another great idea. We'll make sure to pass that along to the folks who will be on the ground working more closely with these residents. And so that's a good idea. She also said even people with resources can't get legal assistance with these kinds of issues in this area, which is absolutely true.
Yeah.
And one of the options we do have, because these are low income residents, is Legal Aid of Northwest Texas, and we will be linking them up with some of these residents. And legal aid can help with a lot of these civil type cases, especially with illegal evictions and things of this nature. It's really kind of one of the big things that they do on an ongoing basis. And so if you do have any other resources or anything like that, please feel free to share those and reach out, and we will pass those along to everybody that needs to have them. The other one I wanted to shout out was from Kim, who organized the Peaceful Rainbow Sit-In. She wanted to acknowledge the other event organizers who helped out with it. She says the other event organizers who helped with the Peaceful Rainbow Sit-In also happened to be some of my best friends. And it just went away because somebody commented again. But it was Bethany Luna, Megan Honeyman, Nick Harpster, and Morgan Kirkpatrick. All helped to organize that and to get folks there. And then, of course, shout out to all of the 80 plus participants who were there and everybody who was there in spirit or wrote messages or commented with their support. Thank all of you. And one last comment, Stacy says, hopefully they are more helpful than the paid attorneys are, who won't take those cases for any amount of money. And yes, Stacy, I can tell you there's some great folks at Legal Aid of Northwest Texas here in Lubbock, and they will definitely do the due diligence to try to help these folks out as much as possible. This is a big part of what they do, helping low-income folks with these kind of issues, because as we said, a lot of times they just can't do these things on their own.
Yeah.
So that's it.
I mean, I would just mirror that again. I mean, the DSA folks, everybody that showed up for the Rainbow Sit-In, our partner organizations, like we have ever seen, every single time we have seen the public show up for a thing, you comported yourself with nobility and dignity and such grace and humanity. And I appreciate y'all. I love y'all. I thank y'all. Thanks for being there, Adam. You can close the show, dude. We got close. We were 5 minutes over. 5 minutes over.
Yeah,
that's not bad.
Well, all I do now is just remind everybody to join your neighborhood association, because first of all, they're going to start getting a lot of help from the neighborhood planner. And also that's one of the easiest ways to get plugged in to helping your neighborhood and your city. And so join your neighborhood association. And other than that, that's it, Josh. I guess we'll see everybody next week.
Good show,
Good
man.
night.
I'll see you then.